All right, and we're back with the show. It's Gerald coming right back at you here. And it's time to talk some Tarantino because Once Upon a Hollywood is debuting this coming Friday. And I'll tell you what, a lot of people are excited out there in regards to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the ninth film from Quentin Tarantino, a guy who's just done a great job out there with some films that and a library that it's probably one of the most diverse. It's probably one of the most noticeable. It's probably one of the most famed library collections of a director that's out there. His work has truly been inspiring to many. His work has truly been lauded by so many individuals out there. He is a critical and also popular darling with so many hits and so many different types of films and genres that he's approached. And I'll tell you what, in the nine films that he's done to up until this point, he's really gone ahead and pushed the envelope. He's really just changed the way a lot of filmmakers go ahead and perceive the film genre. And here to talk with me today about Quentin Tarantino is a great podcaster indeed. In fact, you got to check out his awesome show, the Art House Legends, today on Libsyn and also every major podcast outlet. It's a great show covering the world of film. He's here today to talk about some Quentin Tarantino. It's Eric Offill. Eric, it's just great to have you a part of the program today.
I'm glad to be here. And just to kind of set things up, when it comes to Quentin Tarantino, I have literally grown up on his particular films. Reservoir Dogs came out when I was 12. I saw the trailer for that. I didn't see it until after I saw Pulp Fiction. And so, in a way, you could say that my teens and moving forward had kind of had their transitions with the Tarantino films. That said, I am not a fanboy of Tarantino. I love Tarantino because he's willing to challenge himself, but at the same time, he does have some serious flaws in his work, and it's one of those things that it's an admiration, disappointment thing with me when it comes to him because when in many cases he'll go one step forward, but then he'll take a step back. And as a geek, a nerd, someone who appreciates 60s and 70s films as he does, I'm kind of in a weird place with him specifically.
Well, I'll tell you
But
what,
yeah,
his
I
film.
just
Oh, go ahead.
no,
Well,
go
I'll
ahead.
tell you what, his films are definitely out there. He does go ahead and push the boundaries of what filmmaking is all about. And like you said, sometimes it's for the better, sometimes it's for the worse. He does go ahead and strike a chord with an audience out there almost every time that he's been able to put out his work each and every time. I mean, like you said, Reservoir Dogs came out and that literally put him on the map. Of course, Pulp Fiction and so much more in the 90s and evolving his work into the 2000s up until today. Going into that, what is some of the favorite work that you do have? Because you mentioned, like you said, that there is work out there of his that are uneven as far as some of it good, some of it bad, in your opinion. What is, in your mind, some of the favorite movies that you have in mind when it comes to Quentin Tarantino that you like to talk about on your program?
Well, we've talked about so far. I want to say 7 of the 9 films that he's had. That's officially a part of his oeuvre. Death Proof kind of is in that half area, considering that it was part of an anthology of sorts. But um, quite honestly, when it comes to his films, Pulp Fiction is easily the best of his films. I mean, if you were to look at it objectively, like when you break it down to its smallest parts, Pulp Fiction is the Citizen Kane of the 90s. And in fact, I would say it's the Citizen Kane of the late the late 20th century, to be perfectly honest, because you can look at that film, dissect it, find all those parts, see where everything works, and it works so perfectly, and it's in tune so well that it falls. It also kind of hinders any film that he makes after that because, like Orson Welles, when it comes to Citizen Kane, how do you follow up a quote unquote perfect movie in that sense? And I know that there are people who don't like it, but I could objectively make the argument that it is a perfect film. Movie that I personally like, that gives me the feels, the ones that I go back to over and over again, I probably say is Django Unchained. Primarily because what he does with that particular film that I admire a lot is that he is completely subjective. At this particular point, he wants to say something about racism. He understands his weaknesses as a filmmaker in the sense of getting a message across. So he does this next best thing, which is just kill all the bad guys, and kill them gloriously. He did that within in Glorious Bastards. He would go on again to do it in Hateful Eight. He knows that that's something that he is good at doing and doing with such style. But at the same time, Django Unchained just it reached that pinnacle of subjectiveness that I find completely admirable in his work. Even if, like I said, it is so completely subjective and doesn't. It was at the time even criticized for not taking the subject seriously, or the people didn't think that he was taking the subject seriously. And I don't agree with that particular assessment. I think that he understood that he couldn't get that point across the way that like 12 Years a Slave could, or that Roots could. He had to do it his way. And the way he did it was kill the bad guys and kill them so wonderfully that you're with Django the entire time.
Similar to what you're going to probably see in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, how he's going to take an event that is common knowledge and that is well known, and that's the unfortunate Manson murders and the murder of Sharon Tate. And you're probably right. He is going to most likely put a new spin on that, or his spin, I should say, his stamp on it, and it will probably be altered, changed, or moved around a little bit as far as the events of that, of those of that fateful night 50 years ago is concerned. So we are going to probably see his reimagining of those type of events, which we've seen before in Inglourious Bastards, and like you said, a little bit as far as in his past when it concerns his films. I want to ask you in regards to a favorite scene. Is there a scene that pops out particularly in mind? Because I will tell you, my background with Quentin Tarantino started with Pulp Fiction. I did see that in the theaters, and I will say, like you said, it was a truly outstanding film, and it just for me it broke boundaries on what I had ever seen before in on a movie screen, and I didn't think that people were going to go to the lengths that they did, or could go to the lengths that Tarantino did when showing such a film, and to see those type of boundaries being passed and broken through in Pulp Fiction was truly amazing in and of itself. I have some other favorite scenes, including, obviously Kill Bill when it concerns, the killing of the Yakuza. That scene is just truly remarkable. It's over the top. It's crazy, I know, and there's a lot of blood
The House
spraying
of
all
Blue
over the
Leaf
place.
scene.
Pardon?
The House of the Blue Leaf scene.
Yes.
That's one of those scenes that is so satisfying because it gives you exactly what you were hoping for. And I think that's one of the things that Tarantino aims for as a filmmaker. And I don't want to be talking for him because I feel like his films say everything that he wants to say. But I will say, though, that my assessment of his work is he wants to give you the thing that you want and then give you something that you didn't know that you wanted. And in most cases, he succeeds perfectly. Like whenever you say that there's one scene, there's always that one scene in every one of his films that is absolutely amazing, with the exception of Hateful Eight. But that's a whole different ball game at that particular point. And I've made a very large assessment when it comes to Hateful Eight that you can find on the podcast. But like with Reservoir Dogs, the confrontation with Mr. Orange is an incredible scene. The way Michael Madsen just plays it, especially how the entire conflict occurs when Mr. Orange shows up. When you have, for me, when it comes to Pulp Fiction, the scene, the open, just right from the beginning, from Honey Bunny until to when Vincent Vega goes to meet Mia. That entire first 20 minutes of the film is powerful. And then of course you have Jackie Brown, and you have the scenes with the scenes between Odell Robbie and Robert De Niro, which I think are just very powerful, but at the same time they're very quiet. They capture the essence of both what Tarantino is capable of doing, while at the same time from the source material, which I absolutely love, Elmer Leonard's Rump Punch, capturing the essence of the story while giving it his own twist. And those scenes, I think, really do kick that up a notch. Then, of course, you have Kill Bill, House of Blue Leaves, and then, of course, you have that amazing, that amazing fight with L. Driver in part two. Then, of course, you have Inglourious Bastards. We all know what scene in Inglourious Bastards is the best scene. I mean, it's not even, it's hands down. You can't, there's no competition. Although I will say that the German bar probably is distant second. Is the
Yeah,
second
but it's
closest.
still a very good scene with Michael Fassbender and it just tearing it up right there. I think that really put him on the map as far as people saying, "Hey, this guy can really just act and really do a great job." I think it showcased his skills quite nicely.
Well, before then, he was doing Hunger, which was his big claim to fame before Inglourious Bastards. This introduced him to American audiences in a way that, uh, that made him a star. Absolutely. Um, but at the same time, though, like that scene in the house with Hans Landa in his introduction, it set up one of the possible one of the best 21st century villains. And let's be honest here, we haven't had a truly memorable villain in the 21st century within the last 20 years, with the exception maybe of Anton Chigurh and the Joker. But even Hans Landa, in my opinion, is probably even worse because he is so cunning in a way that those guys were more anarchists. And the way that he truly twisted that knife in that scene, where you were with me, I remember catching my breath near the end when you know how this is going to play out and just how he did. And still trying to puzzle how he did it. It's kind of like an evil Sherlock Holmes type thing for that scene. And then, of course, Django. I mean, let's be honest here. That, in my opinion, Leonardo DiCaprio should have won an Oscar for that performance. That was his. And I understand. I love Wolf of Wall Street, but yeah, that scene at the dinner table was the finest acting I think he's ever done. And he bled for he bled for it, which I also got to give him for that too. But
Literally, he did. Yes, this I have heard that. I have heard that news on that. It is some great performances and that's a great sign of a director that he's able to bring out these type of performances. Uma Thurman, the list of John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, time and time again, he's able to bring out the performances of these great actors, and these great actors are able to enhance virtually all of this great library of films. I know, like you said, The Hateful Eight. I think a lot of people have mixed reactions on that. Jackie Brown, because I think more of the fact that because it came directly after uh, Pulp Fiction. I think a lot of people might have issues with that. For me, it's sentimentality when it comes to Jackie Brown because it takes place in an area that I'm from and where I was in and around for most of my early years. So that to me was something special. And yes, as a film, it still resonates with me. But yeah, I can understand why people are not as high on it as say Pulp Fiction, because like you said, Pulp Fiction was a masterpiece, and anything coming right after that, so many eyes are going to be on it. It's probably never going to get the love it deserved if it came out at a different time, a different place, or from a different director. So it may not ever get the love or appreciation that it fully deserves.
I admire the fact that Tarantino went straight to a passion project with Jackie Brown after Pulp Fiction, and I will honestly fight anyone who says that Jackie Brown is a lesser movie because, quite honestly, what one thing that I admire about Tarantino is even after Pulp Fiction, he didn't rest on his laurels. And in fact, I will argue that the only time he kind of rested on his laurels was Hateful Eight. But I also think that he was trying to test himself with trying to kind of go back to Reservoir Dogs, one single location. Can I do this? And try to do a more kind of a bigger budget version of Reservoir Dogs, which I can appreciate that in itself. But with Jackie Brown, he took Elmore Leonard's novels, an author that he absolutely admired, and especially if you've ever read Elmore Leonard's novels, this Tarantino is a natural fit for that. Unfortunately, though, Get Shorty came out, before this, and Get Shorty did Elmore Leonard almost perfectly in itself. But Tarantino didn't make an adaptation of Elmore Leonard. He took Elmore Leonard and he made it Tarantino. And that, I think, is amazing. Pam Grier, Robert Forster. I never really appreciated Robert Forster up until Jackie Brown. And now whenever I see him, I absolutely admire him. I last weekend I saw him in a movie called Alligator, which I don't know if you've ever seen. Giant alligator in the middle of a city type movie. It's schlocky, but it is written by the great John Sayles, who did Lone Star and Make One, and he's done all these great indie films. But he was the guy who wrote this, and Robert Forster is the protagonist. And I'll tell you right now, this is a good movie. Very low budget, but very good, and it's a giant alligator monster movie for crying out loud. I mean, I honestly don't think we have enough giant alligator monster movies, to be honest.
Well, Crawl is
But
trying to change that, my friend. Crawl is trying to change that, but
don't get
need
me
I
started.
digress?
I could talk. I could talk 20 minutes on Crawl, but no. And considering what we're getting with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, um, I'm excited for specifically when it comes to performances like Luke Perry, who I think is capable of doing great stuff. I've seen a little bit of him in Riverdale. Uh, I have a hard time with television, to be honest, but um, I know that he's capable of doing something good. And knowing that this is his final performance, that hopefully we'll see a part of him that will kind of give more of appreciation to what he was capable of. And on top of that he's willing to take chances with actors the way that he does. I mean, we can talk about Christoph Waltz, who came out of nowhere. I mean, he's just a German actor that Tarantino saw and just said, you know what, I'm going to not only base this movie, but I'm going to write another role just for him. I'm going to write that role just for him because I just see so much in him. And the guy won 2 Oscars for that. I mean, seriously, I can't. When it comes to Tarantino, there's a lot that I admire. Even if I'm not the fanboy, even if I'm a little bit skeptical when it comes to movies, even with this one, like you were saying with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that there'll be a focus on the Manson murders. If that happens, I'll be disappointed
Well, it's just going to be a
because, in
part.
my
I
opinion,
know it's going to be a part of it. And, with Tarantino, he's going to probably go ahead and see things in a different light when it comes to those murders.
the reason why I'm hoping there's 2 reasons. First off, because he's using the Once Upon a Time in moniker, which, if you think about it, we've had Once Upon a Time in the West, Once Upon a Time in America, Once Upon a Time in Mexico. You use that particular moniker when you're going to tell a story that is epic, because it makes your mind focus on a fairy tale. And 1969 was a crazy year in American history, and especially in Hollywood. This, in my opinion, is possibly the film. And considering the reaction to Khan that Khan had to this particular movie, this could be Tarantino finally achieving the one thing that I think even he didn't know if he was capable of doing, which is, could he actually top Pulp Fiction? And that's the challenge. And I will be honest here, if he is capable of creating that epic scope, doing all of that kind of building the characters and building the story and having and being able to contextualize the Manson murders into all of it, not making it too big a part of it. Then, in my opinion, this could actually be it. This could be the holy grail, so to say.
And that is going to be something that we're going to be looking towards to. And yeah, I want to clarify that I don't think it's going to be a major part of it, but there is going to be an underlying story in regards to it, a little sprinkling of it. And like you said, it hopefully, knowing his track record, it'll have at least a little bit in there about it and like his thoughts on it and way he wants to go ahead and reshape those events in his own imagining. I think that's what we're probably going to end up seeing because we have seen it before. But you're right. I want to see more of what's going on circa 1969 in Hollywood because, again, I have a sentimentality when it comes to that time period because that was the year I was born. So, in essence, I will be looking forward to seeing his vision and maybe saying to myself, you know what, is that what it was like during that period of time or something similar in that type of realm in Hollywood. So I'm fascinated by what's coming out when it concerns Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But I want to ask you this as our final question before we head on out. I want to ask you, his future, he has stated within recent days, is that he's only talking about one more film, which quite possibly would be a Star Trek film, an R-rated one, of course, because I don't see Quentin Tarantino doing another PG-13, at least at this point in time. But I want to ask you this. If he does a Star Trek film or even another film and has it be a 10th film from Quentin Tarantino, he says he was going to be stopping at either 10 or 10 films or the age of 60. If that is the case, do you actually see it end up being the final film, the 10th film from Quentin Tarantino as his last performance? Or do you see something else as far as down the line, maybe a project he just cannot pass up?
Honestly, I mean, we've heard this before from him when it comes to retirement. Um, he's a junkie. He loves telling. Now, if you can find an avenue in which he doesn't have to actually direct, but is perhaps honing the next generation of talent, if he finds passion in that, then yeah, I think that he's capable of retiring because I think he's afraid of his legacy getting watered down with bad movies. Say what you will about the greats, Terrence Malick's recent films are diminishing in their quality. Robert Altman's last few films weren't that good. And Tarantino I think he wants to end his career on a very strong note. Whether that be Star Trek, whether that be some other avenue, I don't know. I'll be honest here. When you say that you don't think he's capable of doing PG-13, in my opinion, that would be the perfect reason for him to do it, just for the challenge. Could he actually make, with a self-restraint, saying, I'm not going to, all the things that I've fallen upon, the things that I have basically based my career on, can I actually do a great movie without having to fall to those tropes? But if he's going to just basically do the same old thing that he's doing now, especially when it comes to Star Trek universe, basically he would Tarantino-ize that universe and won't really add anything to it. So I don't know if I would be actually excited about that or not. It would be just, I'd have to see kind of the direction he's going, what he would do with it. I mean, I would watch it anyway just because, I'm a masochist. But I don't know. I don't think that that's the right move. If that's kind of if that's his intention, to be honest. Whatever his last movie is, I want it to be. I want him to put everything that he feels into it, and I feel like that's what he's doing with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I feel like he's throwing everything he's got at this thing, and that's why I'm really excited about seeing it next week.
Well, I will say this: if it does come to him making a Star Trek and that being his last performance, I think it would come out with him as far as his work being it a passion play for him because this is obviously something that he was probably dreaming about when he was working at the video store so long ago, or when he was talking with Robert Rodriguez when I guess they had shared or were back in the early days before their real start in filmmaking, when they were, I guess, either sharing apartment or knew each other and spoke so long about their love for filmmaking. So I'm curious to see what he would do with that franchise, because it does need a swift kick. It does need something good to happen to it, because it's not quite at the level I feel it should be. But again, that's another whole conversation. And if that's the case, and he does ultimately come to the point where he does direct the next Star Trek, and it does become something of his vision, I'd love to have you back on the show, or even sooner for that fact, if you want to go ahead and talk about any subject you want when it concerns pop culture. But one last thing, I'm talking to Eric Offill. He is the man behind the Arthouse Legends, that's available today on Libsyn and all other major podcast apps. But I've spoken about your great podcast. But you got to tell everybody out there that's listening to our show why Arthouse Legends is a show that you need to listen to if you're into movies.
Well, first off, I am the movie dude Eric of Arthouse Legends podcast, and what our show does is we look at classic, indie, and kind of the critically acclaimed films, and we look at it from a geek perspective. Does this movie garner the critical acclaim that it's earned from the critics? And if we think that it does, then we'll give it some kudos. If it doesn't, then we give it the biggest ribbing that it can possibly get. And we have a lot of fun doing it. We have gone through pretty much all, like I said, we've done 7 of the 9 Tarantino films. We have done quite a bit with the likes of Alfred Hitchcock. We've done the movies of the 20s, 30s, and 40s, as well as stuff that just came out recently. We do horror films. We do science fiction. We do dramas. We do documentaries, and we just have a whole lot of fun with it. So if you want to give us a shot, we are Arthouse Legends. We're pop culture and where pop culture and film criticism collide, and I want y'all to join us.
Awesome. Once again, it is the Arthouse Legends podcast. You got to check it out today, again, on Libsyn and all other major podcast outlets. Well, Eric, it's just been a great pleasure to talk to you today when it concerns Quentin Tarantino. Again, the door is always open if you want to come back and talk about great pop culture or film subjects, because it's always great to have you a part of the pop culture cosmos.
Well, thank you very much.